In a fully loaded Boeing 747 with more than 200 passengers on board, a disturbing message was relayed just after takeoff. Look at that crazy fuel flow indication on number 4. Within a few seconds, there was a deafening explosion in the air. How could this happen? Stay tuned. A Boeing 747-100 carrying 230 passengers and crew was preparing for a scheduled international passenger flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport, JFK, New York, to Charles DeGaulle International Airport, CDG, Paris, France. The aircraft being flown was a relatively old Boeing 747-100 produced by Boeing in July 1971 and purchased new by TWA. The plane made its first flight on October 27, 1971 in TWA livery. The plane was equipped with 4 Pratt & Whitney P&W JT9D-7AH turbofan engines, generating 46,000 pounds of thrust. On the day of the accident, the ill-fated aircraft departed from Athens, Greece as TWA Flight 881 and landed at JFK around 4:31. The flight crew that had flown the ill-fated aircraft from Athens, Greece to JFK stated to investigators that hadn't observed any operational deviations during that flight. The flight crew operating this flight had extensive experience. The captain was a 58-year-old man who joined TWA on May 20, 1965 and accumulated approximately 18,800 flight hours, including 5,490 hours in the 747. He was assisted by a 57-year-old officer who joined TWA on April 13, 1964. The first officer had approximately 17,000 flight hours, including 4,700 hours in the 747. In addition, a 62-year-old flight engineer was on board who joined TWA on February 26, 1966. The flight engineer/check airman had approximately 3,047 hours of experience as a flight engineer, including 2,397 hours as a flight engineer in the 747. There was also a 24-year-old intern flight engineer on board who joined TWA on June 22, 1996. The intern flight engineer had approximately 2,520 flight hours, including about 30 hours as an intern flight engineer in the 747. TWA 800 was scheduled to depart JFK for Paris around 7 p.m. However, due to some technical issues with the thrust reservoir sensors and some broken cables, the flight was delayed, and maintenance personnel had to lock the thrust reverser for engine number 3. Additionally, replacement of the broken cables took place. Another reason for the delayed flight was a mismatch between passengers and luggage, but after a few precious minutes, this was confirmed. Because it was very hot, the air conditioning was turned on to keep the passengers satisfied, and turning on the air conditioning is a crucial piece in this story. But I'll tell you more about that later. After an hour's delay, the aircraft started the pushback procedure at Gate 27 of JFK at 8:02 p.m. As the sun began to set, TWA Flight 800 taxied towards the runway, joining the queue of departing aircraft. Passengers settled into their seats, some gazing at the magnificent New York City skyline view. During the initial phase of the flight, ATC gave TWA a series of increasing altitude instructions and heading changes. The pilots were in contact with air traffic controllers in New York and received permission to climb to higher altitudes, as expected, with the controller specifying 19,000 feet. As you'll hear, there's a lot happening in the recording.
Heavy climb and maintain 13,000. Jump 76, miles to center, 124.52. Jump 76, 2452, good day. 123 miles to center, 128.75. 28.75.
Shortly after, Air traffic control changed their clearance for Flight 800 to maintain an altitude of only 13,000 feet for the time being.
TWA 800, what's your rate of climb? Today's 800 heavy, about 2,000 feet a minute here until accelerating out of 10,000. Just clear maintain for level 190 and expedite 215. Today's 800 heavy, climb and maintain 190 and expedite to 15,000. Okay, you prefer something else.
Another radio transmission was made, primarily relating to traffic advisories, which was eventually followed by an instruction to climb again.
TWA 800, and the altitude maintain 13,000, 13,000 only now. TWA 800 heavy, okay, stop climb at 13,000. TWA 842, direct in air.
It may sound chaotic, but for the rest, everything seemed to be proceeding normally. However, what the crew didn't know was that the air conditioner was causing the fuel tank under them to become increasingly warmer, to the point where gas vapor started to form. Jet fuel in its gas phase is extremely explosive and flammable. The jet engine fuel had reached a temperature of 53 degrees Celsius, while its flash point is 38 degrees Celsius, turning the fuel tank into a large bomb just waiting to be triggered. As you probably know, there are countless wires throughout the entire aircraft, including inside the fuel tank. If this wiring is well insulated, there's technically no problem. However, this was not the case. The wiring in the entire aircraft, including the fuel tank, was in poor condition. At 8:30, the captain suddenly reported, "Look at that crazy fuel flow indication on number 4. Do you see that?" But he didn't pay much attention to it and returned to his usual duties. This was the last communication from TWA 800. And then it happened. At an altitude of 13,800 feet, a short circuit occurred in the fuel tank. A spark ignited the gas vapor and the aircraft exploded like a fireball. Due to the enormous pressure of the explosion, the aircraft broke into 2 pieces within 4 seconds. The cockpit broke off and dove into the ocean, while the back of the aircraft continued to fly. The rear part of the aircraft, due to a change in center of gravity, first made a dive upward before beginning to free fall towards the Atlantic Ocean. Air traffic control scrambled to establish contact with TWA Flight 800, desperately seeking information about the unfolding emergency. The distress call from the crew indicated a catastrophic loss of control, leaving no room for hope. When it happened, the captain of Stinger B-507 witnessed the explosion and immediately reported it.
Center for Stinger B-507, we are directly over the site where that airplane or whatever it was just exploded, went into the water. Roger that. Thank you very much, sir. We're investigating that right now. TWA 800 Center, TWA 800, the air center right there. TWA 800 Center. I think that was him. I think so. God bless. Stinger B-507, thanks for that report. New York on 133.05. Good day, sir. 05, so long, Stinger 507. Anything we can do for you before we go? Well, I just want to confirm that that you saw the splash in the water approximately 20 southwest of Hampton, is that right? Yes, sir. It blew up in the air, and then we saw 2 fireballs go down to the water, and there's a big small smoke storm coming up from that. Also, there seemed to be a light, I thought it was a landing light iron, it was coming right at us at about 15,000 feet or something like that, and I put down my landing light there.
As the stricken aircraft plummeted towards the ocean, witnesses on the ground watched in horror as flames and smoke trailed behind it. The crash of TWA Flight 800 sent shockwaves around the world. Rescue boats scoured the waters near East Moriches, New York, in a desperate search for survivors. However, hope turned to sorrow as it became clear that there were no survivors among the 230 people on board. In the aftermath of the tragedy, one of the most extensive and meticulous investigations in the history of aviation was launched. After months of extensive analysis, the NTSB, National Transport Safety Board, published its official report attributing the crash to an explosion in the central fuel tank. According to their findings, flammable fuel vapors in the tank ignited, leading to a catastrophic chain of events. The report emphasized several factors, including aging wiring, the presence of flammable materials, and electrical sparks as contributing elements to the explosion. The design features of the Boeing 747 led investigators to the idea that the fuel tank was heated by the air conditioning system located below it. To create a comfortable atmosphere in the cabin, the air conditioning units extract hot air from the engines to produce cooler air that is then distributed throughout the aircraft. Researchers believe that the fuel present in this tank was heated by this air conditioning system to the point where it began to vaporize. The system had been active for over an hour due to the delay of the aircraft in New York. In this gaseous state, aircraft fuel is highly flammable and explosive. As part of the investigation into the disaster, a test flight was conducted, simulating the conditions in the central fuel tank, registering a temperature of approximately 53 degrees Celsius. For reference, the flash point of jet fuel is around 38 degrees Celsius. The fuel tank had effectively been turned into a massive bomb just waiting to be activated. Despite the controversy, the tragedy of TWA Flight 800 had an indelible impact on the aviation industry. It led to significant changes in safety practices in aviation, prompting the sector to review and enhance fuel tank safety measures. The introduction of fuel tank inerting systems, NGS, has reduced the risk of similar incidents, making aviation safer for passengers and crew. It's important to remember that tragedies like the crash of TWA Flight 800 have lasting consequences. The lessons learned from this disaster have shaped the aviation industry's commitment to safety and have led to ongoing advancements.
800, your traffic at 1 o'clock and 7 miles southbound of South Dakota, probably east 1900. Okay, it's 800 heavy, no contact. 900 leaving 15,000, direct hand target on course. Out of 15,000, direct hand target, TWA 180, TWA 18. TWA 800, climb maintain 15,000. TWA 800, heavy, climb and maintain